If you have O-negative blood, the internet has probably told you something strange about yourself, that your blood doesn't match ordinary human ancestry, that it might trace back to something outside this planet entirely. That theory has spread for decades. It is also completely false. But the real explanation, the one written in actual DNA, is even stranger than the myth, and it reaches back further than almost anyone expects. O-negative blood is actually two separate genetic stories layered on top of each other. One story is written in the O, the other is written in the negative. Both of them lead somewhere real. Neither of them leads to outer space. This is what your DNA is actually telling you if you carry this blood type, and where your true ancient ancestors really came from. For years, one theory about Rh-negative blood has circulated online, often dressed up as forbidden knowledge. The claim goes like this: Rh-negative blood cannot be explained by normal human evolution. It must come from an ancient, separate bloodline. Some versions point to extraterrestrial ancestry, others invoke lost civilizations, hidden royal lineages, or beings from outside recorded history entirely. Believers point to a handful of supposedly strange traits: lower body temperature, sensitivity to sunlight, higher IQ, none of which hold up under actual scientific testing. The theory spread for one simple reason: Rh-negative blood really is rare. It really is unevenly distributed across the world. And for a long time, mainstream science struggled to fully explain why. There is one place the Rh factor genuinely does matter in ways that sound almost as dramatic as the myths, just for reasons rooted entirely in ordinary biology. When an Rh-negative mother carries an Rh-positive baby, her immune system can, in certain pregnancies, begin treating the baby's blood cells as a threat. Left unmanaged, this condition, known as hemolytic disease of the newborn, can be dangerous. It's the same medical detail researchers noted about Basque genetics as far back as the 1940s, decades before anyone understood the deeper evolutionary story behind it. The trait is real, and it is medically significant. It was simply never evidence of anything beyond human biology. That gap between a real unanswered question and a satisfying but false answer is exactly where these theories took root. Here is the first real crack in the myth. Long before Rh-negative blood existed as a trait, the O blood type itself was already ancient beyond anything the online theories imagined. In 2012, a team led by geneticist Lore Segurel analyzed the ABO gene across humans and other primates, including gorillas, chimpanzees, and baboons. What they found was almost unbelievable. The genetic variation separating the A, B, and O blood types is millions of years old. Some estimates place the divergence at 4 to 6 million years, predating modern humans entirely, shared in some form across multiple primate species. Your blood type is not a modern trait. It is closer to a genetic fossil, a piece of your biology older than the human species itself. This kind of deep, ancient variation is genuinely rare in human genetics. Most traits that separate individual people today trace back tens of thousands of years, sometimes a few 100,000 at most. A divergence measured in millions of years, shared not just among different human populations, but across entirely different primate species, points to something unusual happening at that genetic location. Researchers describe this as a sign of balancing selection, a kind of evolutionary pressure that actively keeps multiple versions of a gene alive in a population for extraordinarily long stretches of time, rather than letting one version simply win out and replace the others. Nobody has fully solved why the body seems to want to preserve blood type diversity this badly. But the pattern itself confirms one thing beyond doubt. The letter on your blood test, A, B, or O, is connected to a piece of DNA that has been quietly persisting since long before anything resembling a human walked the earth. That is only half the story written inside O-negative blood. The other half, the negative part, points somewhere far more specific and far more recent. Rh-negative blood exists because of a deletion in a gene called RhD, a mutation that removes a protein from the surface of red blood cells. That mutation is rare almost everywhere in the world, except in one place. Tucked into the western Pyrenees mountains, along the border of modern Spain and France, live the Basque people, and the Basques carry the highest known frequency of Rh-negative blood of any population on Earth. The Basques are unusual in more than just their blood. They speak Euskara, a language with no confirmed relatives anywhere else on the planet, a linguistic island surrounded by Indo-European languages on every side. Scientists first noticed the Basque blood group anomaly back in the 1940s, decades before DNA sequencing even existed, simply by testing blood samples and noticing the numbers didn't match anywhere else in Europe. A 1949 study, published quietly in an American physical anthropology journal, first documented just how far outside the normal European range Basque blood group frequencies really sat. Nobody at the time had the tools to explain it. They just knew the number was strange, wrote it down, and moved on. That single strange statistic sat unexplained for most of a century, waiting for a technology that hadn't been invented yet. Modern ancient DNA finally gave researchers the tools to ask why. The Franco-Cantabrian region, where the Basque homeland sits today, was one of the most densely populated refuges in Europe during the last ice age, a place where hunter-gatherer populations survived the harshest, coldest centuries of the late glacial period, while much of the rest of the continent was nearly uninhabitable. When the ice retreated, this region became a source population, expanding outward as the climate improved. Picture that landscape roughly 15,000 years ago. Glaciers still gripping most of the continent. A narrow, sheltered band of valleys along what is now the Franco-Cantabrian coast, warmer than anywhere else nearby, rich with game and fish. Small bands of hunter-gatherers surviving here for thousands of years, cut off by mountains and ice from most of the populations spreading elsewhere across Europe. Generation after generation, in relative isolation, while the rest of the continent underwent wave after wave of new arrivals. That isolation is the twist hidden inside your blood type. Zoom out from the Basque Country and the global pattern becomes even clearer. Rh-negative blood is almost exclusively a European story. Frequencies drop off sharply across the Middle East and become vanishingly rare across most of East Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the indigenous populations of the Americas, where it can sit below 1%. This is not a trait humanity carried out of Africa evenly. It is a trait that appears to have concentrated generation after generation within the specific populations that weathered Ice Age Europe, then spread outward at different strengths, depending on how much later migration diluted it. O-negative blood overall, combining both halves of this story, is estimated to sit around 7% of the world's population, and that number climbs measurably higher across the Basque Country than almost anywhere else on the planet. Population geneticists have modeled how Rh-negative frequency moved through Europe's three major ancestral groups. The estimates show a striking pattern. Early Neolithic farmers arriving from the Near East carried Rh-negative at very low rates, only around 4%. The Ice Age hunter-gatherer populations of Europe carried it far more often, modeled at roughly a quarter of individuals. Later, Bronze Age steppe populations carried an even higher rate. When these three ancestral groups mixed together to form the ancestors of modern Europeans, the resulting Rh-negative frequency landed almost exactly where you'd expect from a blend of those three populations. But the Basques never fully blended. Protected by geography and by a language no neighboring group shared, they retained a larger share of that original hunter-gatherer signal than almost anywhere else in Europe. Every wave of farmers and steppe herders and empires that reshaped the rest of the continent passed largely around them. And what their blood carries today isn't alien, it's a preserved echo of Ice Age Europe, still detectable, still measurable, in the veins of people living in those mountain valleys right now. If you carry O-negative blood, this is what the science actually shows. The O half connects you to a genetic lineage older than our species, present in the ancestors we share with gorillas and chimpanzees millions of years before the first modern humans existed. The negative half connects you, however distantly, to Ice Age hunter-gatherers who survived the worst of Europe's last glacial period in a handful of hidden valleys, while the rest of the continent lay buried under ice. No spaceship, no lost civilization, no hidden bloodline waiting to be discovered by conspiracy forums. Just millions of years of primate evolution on one side, and thousands of years of human survival against an ice age on the other, both written into a blood type millions of people carry today without knowing what it actually means. The truth ended up being less mysterious than the myth, and somehow more remarkable at the same time. Your blood isn't proof of something otherworldly. It's proof that a small group of your ancestors held on, in one of the coldest, hardest stretches in human history, in a landscape that broke almost everyone who tried to survive it. They didn't come from beyond this world, they simply refused to leave it. And that refusal is still measurable, still real, still running through the veins of their descendants today. Somewhere in a valley in the Franco-Cantabrian refuge, roughly 15,000 years ago, a small group of hunter-gatherers watched the ice begin, finally to retreat. They had no way of knowing that a mutation quietly carried inside their blood would still be traceable in their descendants 10,000 generations later, in a world reshaped almost beyond recognition, tested not with stone tools, but with a needle and a laboratory slide. They were not the beginning of something extraordinary in the way the myths imagine. They were something better, ordinary people in an extraordinary situation who simply managed to survive it. And if you carry O-negative blood, that survival is written into you, whether you ever knew the story behind it or not.